Manu Mishra, and e4 by Ediz, and Gukesh responds back with the Karo Khan. He plays c6, and it was the same opening that he played in round number 1 against Etienne Bacro. d4 played here, and now Gukesh pushes his pawn to d5. Ediz goes e5, gaining space in the position, and bishop to f5 played. Now knight f3 is what Etienne had played, but h4 is Ediz's choice. h5 by Gukesh. He also tries to gain back some space on the board. And now pawn to c5, c4, striking in the center. And the main move here is e6. He pushes his pawn to e6. Knight comes out to c3. And black plays knight to e7. Ediz brings his knight to e2, and now black has an opportunity here to win a pawn, but it's not the best. Knight d7 makes a lot of sense. The knight comes to g3, attacking the bishop. You want to protect the bishop, so bishop goes back to g6. This has all been seen before and is considered to be a very interesting line for both sides. Bishop g5 pinning here, and f6 is played, but Gukesh goes queen b6, which is also considered an interesting line. Now rook c1, you can chop off this pawn, but first Gukesh goes f6, and you can see the time on Gukesh's clock. He has 1 hour 40 minutes while Ediz has 1 hour 43 minutes. So both are well prepared. G takes f6 taken here, and now the bishop moves back to e3. Black can long castle here, but why not snatch the pawn, says Gukesh. He goes queen takes b2. It is his preparation here. Pawn takes pawn by Ediz, who's also in his prep. And now knight takes on d5. Ediz captures back, knight takes d5, and you can take with both ed or cd. He decides to take with the e pawn, keeping this solid structure here. And bishop to d3, it's an important move, because notice that the rook couldn't go to b1. The bishop was controlling that square. A check to the king, and king to f1. Gukesh snatches the bishop on d3. Queen takes d3, and you can see here black long castle. So in return for all his pains that black has, he has an extra pawn. Rook b1, you can see the king is a bit weak here, but Gukesh believes in the solidity of his position. Queen to a3, offering a trade of queens. Ediz declines it, and now queen a4, keeping the bishop protected. He goes king g1, and Gukesh brings his bishop back to d6. 20 moves have been completed. Some insane prep by both the players, showing what modern chess is all about. Bishop c7, and now I think Ediz thinks for the first time. He takes some time, pushes his pawn to g3. Gukesh also starts to think now. Knight b6. He wants to get his knight to the c4 square. King g2 makes a lot of sense, and Gukesh can go knight to c4. Yes, he brings his knight here. Pawn could come up to b5. The black knight is well positioned here. Bishop h6 is also an idea. He goes rook b1, putting pressure here. Gukesh simply plays b6. And Ediz goes a3, a move that maybe looks a bit slow, but he didn't want to lose that pawn. Rook e8 by Gukesh, and now bishop h6 is a very good move, and Ediz finds it. Excellent play. He's going after the h5 pawn. That's a weak pawn, and then the white h pawn would be very strong. So that's the idea mainly. And now rook to e4 played here by Gukesh. White has an idea with rook c3 and rook b4, but instead Ediz blunders here with queen d1. He's missed that black can go back knight a5, threaten the rook. Rook has to move and the queens get traded. Once the queens are traded, the endgame is just clearly better for Gukesh. So knight to a5 comes in and Gukesh finds that move. Rook to f3 played by Ediz. And now this is clearly a better position for Gukesh. He takes on d1, queen takes d1, rook takes on d1. And Gukesh goes rook to h7. He's clearly better, and well, this is close to a decisive advantage for Gukesh. For Ediz, it's going to be a tough task to recover from here. He goes bishop g7. Maybe a simple way to play now is knight c4 with the idea of b5. He goes rook e6, defending the pawn on f6. Makes sense. And Ediz goes bishop to f8. Wonder what his plan is. Maybe it's knight g7 to attack here and the rook. Knight comes into c4. And Ediz now goes knight to g7. I love how he's fighting here. He's creating issues for Gukesh, who was clearly better. Now goes rook e2. And taking here would be wrong because of knight e3 check, and that would be game over. So king f1, he brings his king back, attacks the rook. Now rook d2 is what Gukesh does. You can't take the rook because of knight takes d2, but white can take the open file here, rook e1. So while Gukesh is pawn up, look at these 3 pieces, 4 pieces in fact, which are meandering around the king here, and rook takes d4. Ediz takes the pawn on f6. Gukesh pushes his pawn to c5, protecting the c6 pawn from being captured. And now he goes rook f5. He's after the h5 pawn. You can take on a3 and then go into this race, but instead Gukesh goes for a check. I think what he wants is to block the e file so that the rook cannot enter in. He brings his knight to e4. But now the h5 pawn falls. 38 moves done. Gukesh down to 3 minutes. He pushes his pawn to c4. The position still even. But Ediz is getting his counterplay. He goes knight f6. He wants to push his h pawn down the board. Knight takes f6. And rook takes f6. It's important now to play king b7. Just bring your king up. Play this carefully. Or even rook d2 is possible. Gukesh now, with just a minute and a few seconds on the clock, blunders with rook d3. And that is on the 40th move, which means Ediz will get 50 minutes to make his next move. And it's the move that will create a lot of problems for Gukesh. h5 is the move, because if you play rook h5, then I can simply go rook f7 with rook e8, rook e7, and you will lose the bishop. That's the problem, and Ediz finds it. He plays h5. Brilliant play by Ediz Gurel. Bishop goes back to d8, and now rook d6 seems to be the move. He goes rook f5. Gukesh back in the game with his chances now. c3. Pushes the pawn to c3. And pawn to h6 played here. The pawn goes up to d4. And now rook to c1. He goes rook to d2. And king comes back to f1. The idea now is bishop e7. Because somewhere you notice that you need to get your bishop into the game, otherwise these pawns are going nowhere. and Ediz goes g4. He's planning to go g5, g6. Gukesh chops off the pawn on a3, which is a blunder. He had to take here, which was an insane line that led to a draw. Look at this line: king b7, g5, rook b2, a very key move, and then you kind of sacrifice your rook and play d3, which is a draw. But instead he goes here, bishop takes a3, and now Gukesh takes the pawn, but now his position is lost. g5, fantastic chess, because when you give a check here, king g2 and take, the bishop takes back, it's protected. So rook g6, king to g2, and Ediz Gurel doing this in style. This boy, just 16 years of age, is showing his tenacity after getting a close to lost position out of the middle game. He's now fighting so hard and has a great position. And this is a lovely move because the bishop was a bit precariously positioned here. He's rerouting the bishop to f4, and from there it will be doing a brilliant job. Bishop f4, rook to d3, and now rook b1. Yes, he plays rook to b1. b6 pawn is hanging, and these pawns are going nowhere as the bishop controls this square. Look at Gukesh. He knows that the writing is on the wall. There is no way he can defend this, and yeah, he's very upset. He's trying to look at the board, but there's nothing much that he can do here. This is going to be his third straight loss in a row in this tournament. Not such an easy pill to swallow here, especially when you get such a good position. But Gukesh, well, he's a fighter. He'll be back. For now, he's wounded. And Ediz took the full opportunity there by making some brilliant moves, fighting hard. And it's time for Gukesh to call it a day. He resigns. Ediz wins. A win against world champion is always very special. And for Gukesh, it's going to be a long way back to his hotel room here. The tournament is still 4 more rounds to go. He's on 3 points out of 7. And in the next round, Gukesh will face Divya Deshmukh, which will also be not an easy battle, considering the form that Gukesh is in. And there you see Gukesh getting up, still remembering always to pay his respects to the board. But what a job by Ediz.